Welcome to lecture number 30. We are doing expanded analysis of financial ratios that we have studied in this course. Now we look at the financial ratios used in annual reports. As we all know, हर कंपनी अपनी at the end of its financial period अपनी annual reports जो हैं उनको इशू करती है. अच्छा, अब those annual reports hold a lot of significance. Uh, Now, what sort of significance does those reports hold? उसमें सबसे important चीज तो होती है the sort of information that you give. आप फॉर एग्जांपल आप अपने इन्वेस्टर्स को क्या इंफॉर्मेशन यू आर ट्राइंग टू पोर्ट्रे. आप अपने जो पोटेंशियल इन्वेस्टर्स हैं, जो पोटेंशियल शेयर होल्डर्स हैं, व्हाट सॉर्ट ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन यू आर गिविंग टू अट्रैक्ट देम, यू नो दैट दे शुड इन्वेस्ट इन योर कंपनी. फिर आप अपने आप बैंक्स को, फाइनेंशियल इंस्टीट्यूशंस को आप क्या इंफॉर्मेशन प्रोवाइड करते हैं. आप जो हैं अपने बोर्ड ऑफ डायरेक्टर्स को क्या इंफॉर्मेशन दे रहे होते हैं. आपके जो एग्जिस्टिंग शेयर होल्डर्स हैं उनको आप ओवरऑल व्हाट सॉर्ट ऑफ कॉन्फिडेंस लेवल डू you want to give them. So all these factors determine what sort of financial ratios you put in the annual reports. Financial ratios are used to interpret and explain financial statements. Used properly, they can be effective tools in evaluating a company's liquidity, debt position, and profitability. Probably no tool is as effective in evaluating where a company has been financially and projecting its financial future as the proper use of financial ratios. So, financial ratios are a very powerful and significant tool to tell exactly where the company stands. And if for a user who has sufficient knowledge of accounting, the user can easily interpret where the company stands. A firm can use its annual report effectively to relate financial data by the use of financial ratios. To determine how effectively firms use ratios to communicate financial data, annual reports of 100 firms identified in the Fortune 500 industrial companies were reviewed. The objective of this research project was to determine which financial ratios were frequently reported in annual reports, where the ratios were disclosed in the annual reports. Of annual report के there are many parts. For example, आपके नोट्स हैं. बहुत सी कंपनीज जो हैं वो अपनी इनकम स्टेटमेंट के साथ भी चंद एक रेशियोज देती हैं. बहुत सी कंपनीज जो हैं वो अपनी बैलेंस शीट के साथ दे देती हैं. बहुत सी कंपनीज कैश फ्लो स्टेटमेंट के साथ इनकॉर्पोरेट करती हैं. बहुत सी कंपनी जो हैं वो नोट्स में देती हैं. सो यू कैन पुट financial information at different places in the financial report. What computational methodology was used to compute these ratios? As we know, there are different ways to calculate one particular type of ratio. So you have to mention, and you should always mention what criteria did you use in coming up with that figure. Exhibit 11.8 indicates the ratios disclosed most frequently in the annual reports reviewed and the section of the annual report where the ratios were located. अब आप देखेंगे कि जो अर्निंग्स पर शेयर है, इट वाज इंक्लूडेड इन ऑल द फाइनेंशियल रिपोर्ट्स दैट वर स्टडीड. टोटल आपकी 100 स्टडी हुई थी. 100 आउट ऑफ 100 हैड द अर्निंग्स पर शेयर फिगर इन इट. अब ज्यादातर उसमें जो मेजॉरिटी है वो आपको कर लेती हैं, मैनेजमेंट हाइलाइट्स में मेंशन किया हुआ था, फाइनेंशियल समरी में भी मेंशन किया हुआ था, प्रेसिडेंट्स लेटर. अब ये जो है दीज आर डिफरेंट पार्ट्स ऑफ द एनुअल फाइनेंशियल रिपोर्ट. उसमें मुख्तलिफ पार्ट्स में यू कैन इनकॉर्पोरेट different types of financial ratios. The second one is dividends per share जो 98% में था. टोटल 100 का मवासना किया गया था जिसमें 98 had the dividends per share in it. अब उसमें आप नोट करेंगे जो the least popular ones were labor per hour, operating margin वगैरह. These did not hold a lot of significance. uh, in the eyes of those 100 companies. Numbers represent both absolute numbers and percentages since a review was made of the financial statement of 100 firms. Logically, profitability ratios and ratios related to investing were the most popular for inclusion in the annual report. Including ratios related to investing in the annual report makes sense because one of the annual report's major objectives is to inform stockholders. Now, why it is one of the मेजर objective उसकी वजह है कि the company is owned by the stockholders, so you have to make sure that as management, since you report to the stockholders, so you have to give them as valuable and as authentic information as possible. A review of the methodology used indicated that wide differences of opinion exist on how some of the ratios should be computed. This is especially true of the debt ratios. हमने अभी तक पढ़ा है debt equity ratio. लेकिन there's another type which is called debt capital ratio. Now, what is the difference? The it is similar to the debt equity ratio, except that the denominator includes sources of capital in addition to stockholders' equity. At present, no regulatory agency such as SEC or FASB accepts responsibility for determining either the content of the financial ratios or the format of presentation for annual reports, except for the earnings ratios, earnings per share. मैं दैट इज वाई आप देखेंगे कि अर्निंग्स पर शेयर का फिगर हर कंपनी में है बिकॉज इट इज वन रेशियो विच इज कंसिडर्ड कंपल्सरी व्हेन एवर यू आर गिविंग योर एनुअल रिपोर्ट्स. Many practical and theoretical issues relate to the computation of financial ratios. As long as each firm can exercise its opinion as to the practical and theoretical issues, there will be a great divergence of opinion on how a particular ratio should be computed. So it means that when it comes to ratios, we need to have a universal agreement as to how the ratios should be calculated and what sort of elements should be used from the financial report to calculate those ratios. Degree of conservatism and the quality of earnings. Now, what is accounting conservatism? It is the principle that requires company accounts to be prepared with caution and high degree of verification. All probable losses are recorded when they are discovered, while gains can only be registered when they are fully realized. So इसका ये है कि आप जो अपनी income और gains हैं, उनको आप you should be ओवर पेसिमिस्टिक जब आप उनको करें कि जब तक आपको 100% श्योरिटी ना हो कि ये गेन या इनकम आपकी हो गई है, यू शुड नॉट इंक्लूड इट इन दी फाइनेंशियल रिपोर्ट. और साथ साथ जो आपके लॉसेस हैं या जो आपके एक्सपेंसेस वगैरह है, those should be immediately entered in the reports जब आप देखेंगे कि उनकी probability is high. A review of financial statements, including the notes, indicates that conservatism with regard to accounting policies. Accounting policies that result in the slowest reporting of income are the most conservative. When a firm has conservative accounting policies, it is said that its earnings are of high quality. This section reviews a number of areas that often indicate a firm's degree of conservatism in reporting income. So, when you look at the financial reports and if you pay close attention to inventory, fixed assets, intangible assets, so using these, accounting concepts, you can easily judge कि उस कंपनी कंजर्वेटिज्म पॉलिसी कितनी है, वो कितनी इजीली और कितनी डिफिकल्टी से अपने एक्सपेंसेस, लॉसेस एंड रिस्पेक्टिवली अपनी गेन्स और प्रॉफिट्स को बयान करती है. Fixed assets. Two accounting decisions related to fixed assets can have a significant influence on income. The method of depreciation and the period of time selected to depreciate an asset. The conservative method, sum of the year's digits and declining balance, recognize a large amount of depreciation in the early years of the asset's life. The straight line method, the least conservative method, recognizes depreciation in equal amounts over each year of assets life. So आपके वो वाले depreciation methods जिनमें depreciation is high in initial years is considered conservative. और जो कि आपका स्ट्रेट लाइन मेथड है, एज यू नो, वो इक्वल डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन होती है आपकी डेप्रिसिएशन एक्सपेंस की, सो दैट इज कंसिडर्ड द लीस्ट कंजर्वेटिव. Sometimes a material difference in the asset's life used for depreciation occurs between firms. Comparing the lives used for depreciation for similar firms can be a clue as to how conservative the firms are in computing depreciation. The shorter the period of time used, the lower the income. Second one is your the first one was inventory. Since we have done fixed assets, then so we will do inventory now. Under inflationary conditions, the matching of current cost against the current revenue results in the lowest income for a period of time. The LIFO inventory method follows this procedure. FIFO, the least conservative method, uses the oldest cost. आपको पता है FIFO means first in first out. So उसमें जो oldest cost होती हैं वो सबसे पहले use होती हैं and उनको revenue के against match किया जाता है. Other inventory methods fall somewhere between the results of LIFO and FIFO. और ये है under inflationary conditions when the prices are increasing. For a construction firm that has long-term contracts, the two principal accounting methods that relate to inventory are completed contract method and percentage of completion method. जो conservative completed contract method है, it recognizes all of the income when the contract is completed. For example, एक company के लिए आप एक you're making a big building, you have a construction company. So आप अपनी income तब show करेंगे जब आपका project complete हो चुका है. और जो आपका परसेंटेज ऑफ कंप्लीशन मेथड है वो इट इज लेस कंजर्वेटिव क्योंकि इट रिकॉग्नाइजेस इनकम एज वर्क प्रोग्रेसेस ऑन द कॉन्ट्रैक्ट. The third one is intangible assets. Intangible assets include goodwill, patents, and copyrights. R&D costs are a type of intangible asset, but they are expense not incurred. जो आपके R&D है आप उसको as an expense show करते हैं, not as uh, as cost. You show it directly as an expense in your income statement. The shorter the period of time used to recognize the cost of the intangible asset, the more conservative the accounting. And you have to remember that goodwill is not amortized. Goodwill की वैल्यू कम नहीं होती, इस पर डेप्रिसिएशन या amortization नहीं होती with time. Some firms spend very large sums on R&D and others spend little or nothing. Because of the requirements that R&D costs be expensed in the period incurred, the income of a firm that does considerable research is reduced substantially in the period that cost is incurred. This results in more conservative earnings. Forecasting financial failure. There have been many academic studies on the use of financial ratios to forecast financial failure. Basically, these studies try to isolate individual ratios or a combination of ratios that can be observed that may forecast failure. Now, how do you forecast financial failure? And in fact, what is a financial failure? ये चीजें हम अभी आगे जाके we will discuss. A reliable model that can be used to forecast financial failure can also be used by management to take preventive measures. For example, just if you look at different ratios और आपके यार ये ratios जो हैं ये show करते हैं financial failure को, so the management can make use of those specific ratios और उनको use करते हुए it can keep a close eye on the performance of the organization. When it sees the ratios deteriorating, it can take immediate steps to um, stop this process of collapse. Since a model can aid investors in selecting and disposing of stocks, banks can use it to aid in lending decision and in monitoring loans. Firms can use it in making credit decisions and in monitoring accounts receivable. A model that forecasts financial failure can also be valuable to an auditor. It can aid in the determination of audit procedures and in making a decision as to whether the fund will remain as a going concern or not. Going concern, going concern means the life of the business is unlimited. That is why you have the accrual accounting. आपकी next financial period में सब कुछ transfer हो जाता है. So that is related to the going concern. Financial failure can be described in many ways. It can mean liquidation, deferment of payments to short-term creditors, deferment of payment of interest on bonds, deferment of payments of principal on bonds और the omission of a preferred dividend. तो ये तमाम फैक्टर्स जो हैं इन ये शो करते हैं कि आपकी फाइनेंशियल स्टेबिलिटी इज क्रम्बलिंग, उसमें कहीं ना कहीं कोई इशू है. One of the problems in examining the literature on forecasting financial failures is that different authors use different criteria to indicate failure. When reviewing the literature, always determine the criteria used to define financial failure. Management's use of analysis. Management can use financial analysis and common size analysis as aids in many ways. Analysis can indicate the relative liquidity, debt and profitability of firm. जैसे हमने अभी तक जितनी financial ratios की हैं उनमें हमने इन चीजों को study किया है. Analysis can also indicate how investors perceive the firm and can help detect emerging problems and strengths in a firm. As indicated previously, financial ratios can also be used as part of the firm's corporate objectives. Using financial ratios in conjunction with the budgeting process can be particularly helpful. Now, what is the comprehensive budget? The comprehensive budget relating to financial statements indicates how a firm plans to get from one financial position to another. The income statement details how the firm changed internally from one balance sheet position to another in terms of revenue and expenses. So ये तमाम चीजें आपको comprehensive budget से मिलती हैं. If management cannot change the proposed comprehensive budget satisfactorily to achieve the corporate objectives, they should know this when the comprehensive budget is accepted. Management of earnings. Chapter 1 describes cash basis as recognized revenues when cash is received and recognizing expenses when cash is paid. It was indicated that cash basis usually does not provide reasonable information about the entity's earning, or that is why we use accrual basis. Accrual basis में होता है कि you should record the you should recognize the revenue in the period in which it was earned rather than when it was paid. इसी तरह उसी मैचिंग प्रिंसिपल है कि you should match the expenses that were incurred with respect to that revenue. So that is called the accrual basis. So obviously, tamam companies जो हैं they follow, most of the companies in fact follow accrual basis, and they always give that indication in their statements. जो जैसे Nike का आप देखेंगे in the notes that I have given, they have given a statement which clearly shows how the report was made. For example, इन्होंने बता दिया कि revenue recognition was used, inventory reserve, stock based compensation. So all these things were taken care of while making the report. Now we'll do a few questions related to expanded analysis. The commercial loan officers did not list the dividend payout ratio as highly significant ratio, but they did indicate that the dividend payout ratio appeared frequently in loan agreements. Speculate on the reason for this apparent inconsistency. Now we know the dividend payout ratio does not primarily indicate liquidity, debt, or profitability, but it is of interest to investors because it indicates the percentage of earnings that is being paid out in dividends. So obviously, from the investor point of view, वो तो वही देखता है कि how much money do they get if they buy stocks. For them, this ratio is important. Financial ratios are used extensively in annual reports to interpret and explain financial statements. Comment. Financial ratios aren't used extensively in annual reports. उसकी वजह है कि there is no, as I've told you, there is no fixed criteria. The only criteria uh, relates to earnings per share. Baki, it is all left to the judgment of the management. So that is why they don't use it very much in the financial report. Which of the following FCN method is considered to be the least conservative? It is, the straight line method, as I've told you. उसकी वजह है कि उसमें हर साल में equal होता है, और जिनमें it is always more in the initial years, those are considered most conservative. There are many definitions or descriptions given to financial failure. Which of the following does not appear to be a reasonable definition or description? Refinancing of bonds payable, it has nothing to do with the financial failure. Liquidation does. Deferment of payments to short-term creditors, deferment of payments of interest on bonds, all these do indicate some sort of financial failure, but refinancing of bonds payable does not show. Which of the following statements is not true? The depreciation method and the period of time selected to depreciate an asset can have a significant influence on income. It is true. There are many depreciation method. हमने depreciation के topic में we did many ways to calculate depreciation. So this is also true. The depreciation methods that recognize a large amount of depreciation in the later years of an asset life are conservative. It is wrong because जो initial year में होता है that is always considered the most conservative. In financial accounting, which of the following assets is not considered to be an intangible asset? You know, आपका goodwill is intangible, patents, copyright, trademark. Account receivable is not an intangible asset. Which of the following statement is not true? A review of financial statements, including the notes, will indicate how conservative these statements are in regard to accounting policies. So this is true. When we look at EV, it says conservative accounting policies always result in the lowest reported income for any given period of time. This is false. So these are the questions that relate to expanded analysis, and this is the end of lecture number 30.